This is for a company sort of really looking to figure out where do they prioritize branding in their product development.
It's not the color and the logo and the font selection, but it comes down to that insight, that the heartbeat of your brand.
So tell me a little bit about like what's that image you have there in the background?
This one.
Yeah.
The kids
Well,
made me a birthday card. It's Donald Trump. And they say, instead of saying make America great, it's make B-Days great again. So, with your
that is
tiny little
hilarious.
hand. So,
That's awesome.
like,
You got some designer kids there.
you're welcome.
So just to kind of like, I'll kind of give a little bit of intro on myself. So this is our first webinar, first video that we're doing. And we've always wanted to be able to find like a platform to be able to give back to a lot of the companies and entrepreneurs that we work with, that we've known, that we've helped over the past. So myself, I'm a creative director, graphic designer by trade. I own an agency, creative digital agency, Pastilla, and I've been doing this for about maybe close to 20 years now. Everything from branding to product design to UX, UI, and motion, and so forth. So I've been in a lot of different aspects of creative, of design, and so forth. But I think at the end of the day, like my focus has really been on branding, and that's really kind of like the core of my perspective or the mindset of everything that I do around the different elements of creative, and that sort of seep through my agency as well.
Mm-hmm.
The agency's been around, Pastilla, for 15 years. We've helped everything from Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies to startups, which is we're going to go to it a little bit later, but that's kind of a little bit of our focus in here. So JR, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. JR or Jean-Roux, definitely originally a South African transplant. When I was in South Africa, I was a creative director in traditional advertising, media, branding, TV commercials, etc. When I immigrated in 2010, my decision was to get over to digital. I love branding, I love marketing, but for me, like digital products just had a lot more life to it. Like when you did a TV commercial, it was fun and it was entertaining, and people would be, that's hilarious, and they would share it. But that was it. There wasn't this interaction. I changed over to digital when I started out in Seattle. I worked for a large e-commerce jewelry company called Blue Nile, and started off doing visual design for them, but then sort of advanced into full product design from there. So the branding and the people you're speaking to is like deeply rooted in my experience, and that sort of empathy for the human being. Because if you don't understand the person, you're not going to speak to them the right way. And they're sort of going to be, they can ignore you easier, right? It's like you're not relative, or they don't relate. Where I'm at now, work fully remote, been doing Fortune 500, worked on huge global brands, and I've worked with people who want to take a vlog into a product that's a subscription model. So I run the gamut.
I think that your background makes sense to what attracted me and Dan to continuing to work with you. Or first of all, even like, starting the relationship and working together, because, you're unique in the sense that your background, everybody at this point, usually, especially if you're a semi-seasoned UX UI designer, comes from lots of different backgrounds at this point, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be the same in 20 years. Now kids are studying UX UI from the beginning. But when we were in school, that wasn't a major focus. You kind of had like your branding mindset, your advertising mindset lended that well, rather than like really being hyper focused into one thing. And it worked for us, for a lot of the clients that we had, because we kind of needed somebody that helped in lots of different aspects of product design and UX UI.
My experience has been with people that came from a pure UX background. They're very data driven and almost detached from the human being. It's like, you have data that I'm going to drag out of you, which helps when it comes to like testing. You don't want to influence somebody, but I have found that they have a very almost mechanical approach to things. For me, it's always like you're building something for a human being, so you need to be informed with data, but you need to understand them so that when you understand the data, you can create something that's meaningful to them, right?
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, which I think that's exactly a big part of why we're making this video, because we're seeing a lot of, really at the end of the day, like this video, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a founder, and I say entrepreneur and kind of in the broader sense where, you have an idea, you're starting to maybe start to think about who your team is going to be, who your co-founders might be. And you're just looking for those like initial baby steps, or you're already founded a company and been successful and you're looking to start another one, or you have a startup that's sort of at, different levels of stages of funding. And, we're really speaking to that person right at that point where they're making this decision in terms of what the next phase is, right, of their startup, whether it's like baby phase, another phase within the different stage of funding. Right. So that's the CTOs, CEOs of these companies.
Entrepreneurs that are looking to sort of go digital with a service, there's those guys too. They seem to be a little different. If they didn't come from a digital product background, they're a little more cowboy-esque, like effort, we can do it. What does it take? What happens? But to your point, like CTOs and CEOs for digital startups are often on the technical side. It's not always that you have a creative person involved in the starting point. So you can tell often when a product came from developers and a technical person versus someone that's a creative person, and to be fair, like sometimes us creators get a little too squishy, too like it's my baby too early, and I think coming back to the point where knowing where the company is at is a very, very important part of decision making, because you don't want to go out and do this full blown like brand. It looks beautiful. That's an amazing portfolio piece. And the company literally, like after the first 3 months, pivots and changes completely. So you're just coming back to that point in the discussion we wanted to have today is like, where's the value, right? Like it's the underlying theme is branding is important, because a brand isn't a logo and colors and fonts. It's association is the brand. It's that life source of what your product stands for. Now you bring that back to your product. If you get that right early and your product does what it's supposed to, it becomes something that people relate to and they take on, rather than, it's a tool. Like, has anyone ever spoken about a hammer in a way that's exciting? No. It does a job. But what you make with that hammer, now that's a different story.
Exactly. Where JR is leading at here is that this is for a company sort of really looking to figure out where do they prioritize branding in their product development, right? Like most likely they have a really deep understanding of, or they maybe not even deep understanding, but they've gotten to a point where they realize, I know it's important, but there's a gazillion other things that are on my list. I'm not sure if that is something that I need to do right now. A few ways to kind of simplify this thinking, maybe structure it a little bit, for you to kind of at least start to give you some foundation as to what to do depending on what stage you're at in developing your startup and product. So really that prioritizing is exactly what you're talking about. It's like, what are all the different things that are happening? Why is branding even important? Like, how is it going to give me some kind of return at the end? And where does it fit in terms of everything else that I have to do? At the end of the day, the team, the product, there's nothing more important than that, right? You can't do anything without the right team, the right people, picking the right co-founders, picking the right team. We all know if you're watching this right now, it's already, you probably already made that decision, but it's really, really important to have that fine tune. Developing the product, like the specifications, the wireframing, all of that, to getting an understanding of what your product actually does and what problem is it solving. That is obviously, and how to solve it. There's nothing more important than that, because there's nothing else around that. But tying all these things together is the brand. So although you might not find a way how to prioritize it exactly, we're doing this video to help you figure out a way to find that, find a place where you're not backpedaling later on, and you're actually able to leverage some of the branding that you've done, even if it's smaller, and see the value in that. And if it's much bigger branding initiative that you've taken, then that alone right there should give you, you should be able to understand why you're doing it, what's the goal, how does it make your business better, and what's the perception that that the branding you've been developing is doing. Like, what's that value? So the first step maybe that we should talk about is, I looked at it at least from three different types of startups. I mean, tell me what you think. And the way I saw it is, first, you got a startup that is well funded, right? Most likely they have developed some big product before and they're looking to launch something else. So somebody's already invested quite amount of money to get this next product going, whether it's a part of this other brand or it's a completely new product. Or, they, for whatever reason, have ties to VCs and their experience and name has been able to, raise funds. In my experience, those companies are looking for really 2 to 3 year, maybe 4 years max of getting to that like high growth point, to where they really can meet that hockey puck growth.
Yeah.
And to do so, because the investors are putting a lot of money and they want the returns as fast as possible. They're not looking for like the 5-10 year return. They're looking for like the 2 to 5 year max return on the investment, maybe whatever, 10, 100x, whatever it may be that VC is looking for. In my opinion, you have to really hit the ground with being pretty confident. I mean, there's a couple of perspectives. One perspective is you have to hit the ground running fast, right? Which means you have a big team quickly. You have to integrate the team quickly. You have to make sure that the entire team is in sync in terms of the product vision, the values of the brand, the values of the product, because even if it might pivot features or even like maybe even doing like a 45-degree pivot, you're still looking at some branding foundations that are going to keep things moving in the right direction, right? So that the resources are being utilized. And because there's a lot of money, things are moving really fast. And so because you're going to be probably also being exposed to a large amount of users really quickly, there's momentum in garnering brand awareness, building brand equity right from the bat, right? Where people are, whether it's good or bad, and that's kind of a little bit of the risk, right? Because the product is too early or so forth. But really, ultimately, brand awareness, brand equity is really, really valuable. And the quicker, at this point, I feel like if you're looking at the hockey puck growth, you have to be able to think through those larger brand strategy, brand positioning questions that maybe not even logo. I'm not even talking about the details, the actual physical parts of branding, which is the logos, identity systems, the visual photography, and so forth. I'm talking about the more foundational things that matter to get those things launching. So there's that perspective where you kind of need to hit the ground running, essentially, right? And because you're going to get so much exposure through ads or whatever it may be, whatever the marketing tactics are, the go-to-market strategy, you need to make sure that you're seen at an elevated level, right?
Yeah.
The Silicon Valley sort of more like, it's not even that. I would say more like the agile process, which is you build and pivot, and you test, spending your time constantly refining as you're building, right? Yeah. You're refining the product as you're building. You're testing. What does this name work? We did a branding for one company where they had already had 3 different names, and we tried all 3 of them, right? In like 3-4 months period, and we were just testing. We're shifting and moving around with them. They had the money to do that though, and they had the in-house team to do that pivoting. It is very expensive to do. But the outcome, that's the downside. The outcome is great in the sense that you get a product that's really tried and true and tested. Everything from the product to the branding.
There's always 2 stories with product. There's the side where you are a unicorn. This is the first time someone's done something like this, right? You're literally turning something upside down. And if I use the phrase game changer, we need to have like a weird womp womp sound because I hate that phrase.
Yeah.
But the point being, like, if your product is something that people just haven't ever thought of doing it that way, like an Uber or Airbnb? I mean, those are obvious like results. The branding can almost be a little secondary, right? It's important because people are going to go, what is this? They're going to grapple with it. They're going to get their heads around it. But because you're first and you're the only one, you're the leader. You know, with branding, when you're the leader, your relevance isn't as important as a challenger brand, right? Now, the other side of that is you come in and you want to redo how people finance homes. You are, you know, the 10,000th player in this space. So you're going up against what exists. You got to be different enough. And that, I would say, amplifies or intensifies the brand. So I think there's a decision of like, am I unique? Am I in a new space? Am I first? Am I one of the first? Then branding is a little less sort of, you know, high up in your priorities. But yeah, if you're competing with people in the same space, your brand and why you exist, like I think that's one thing we're going to touch on is there's the what and the how, but above that always is why you exist. You know, it's not what you do. It's not how you do it. It's why you're around. And if you can nail that down in your strategy, it'll also help you pivot and almost always stay true to what you are, unless you fundamentally redirect the business. That's a different story. Now, if you use that why, it's almost always going to be, you're going to be able to layer in or gloss in your branding as you go. You're still going to spend that sort of the right budget to create it, but you're stretching it out. You know, you're starting off with these sort of layers. Like, okay, you're going to need colors. You know, so you're going to need a logo. You're going to need a name. But you don't need to figure out your Instagram stories just yet. You don't have to have like a well-threaded story for Facebook because you're probably a good couple months from launching, right? And then the guys that have tons of money, like they can test the hell out of stuff, you know, so they can try 5 names. They can try 5 different color palettes. They can change the UI, you know, and yeah, it costs them a lot of money, but you're going out with sort of this works. But if you're a startup, like you got to decide, am I going to put that money in servers and storage? You know, am I going to hire like this world-class developer that's maybe off-site? Or am I going to decide to do a logo, you know, like a brand packet? What we're trying to get at is, depending on your stage, it doesn't have to be a this or that. It's just the layers are thinner. You're stretching it out longer. But I would encourage you to start earlier, very loosely. So like we say, like a logo, a color palette, maybe font, you know, but then leave the rest of the stuff to the wayside for a bit, you know, and then you'll probably have to do a PowerPoint. You want your PowerPoint to feel like a part of your brand and extension. The big guys, that's a different story. You know, you've probably got offices now, you have teams, you're paying full salaries for full-time employees. You know, your business is starting to make money. It's got its place in the industry. And now you're looking at that sort of what's the evolution or the revolution of this thing.
One particular well-funded startup, you know, had us, you know, I would say within like 6 months, we probably tried like 3 different names, 3 different marketing campaigns. It was almost like, wait, we showed a bunch of different rounds. This was an ad campaign that we did. And we kind of did some strategy for them, but they kind of soon realized like, they're like, no, we just want like to create ad campaigns and test headlines and test creative and see what works. So we literally ran a campaign of the different ideas and tested which ones actually work, which is great when you can do that and you can afford to do that. And one question I was thinking about when you were talking about looking at a company and they're like, what type of product do they have? Is there a difference? Will branding be prioritized differently if you are creating a product that is consumer, like your focus is gaining consumers? It's not B2B, it's a B2C product, and the end goal is to scale that product with users as much as possible, as fast as possible, versus knowing that your product probably, and I've seen this before, you can say that the focus is gaining users, but really what they're actually building is the technology. And the IP is what's valuable. And I've seen that where it appears that the company is a consumer-driven product. But really, when you look at the founders and the ultimate goal, it's really to be bought by another bigger company, and especially using the technology that they're developing. Do you think that there's one branding maybe might not be as we might be prioritized different or looked at differently than the other?
Yeah, I think there's sort of three facets to that question. There's business to consumer and then B2B. B2B is a little more forgiving on the branding side, but it has to work because the business will talk to decision makers at a company and they're going to try to sell the service. And then the people that use it are basically given the product. Like two people, it's probably a CTO and a CFO.
Yep.
And a company will look at it. Does it do this? What does it cost? Does it work in our budget? Is it going to help us move quicker or smoother or whatever? The answer is yes. It's not so much about the branding. It's more capability, the what versus the why. Consumers, we like to be associated with the choices we make. So that's where branding lopsides things a little bit. It's like you've seen like rip-off Ray-Ban Wayfarers, the sort of classic style, but people aspire to buying the Ray-Bans. But technologically, they're the same. But the brand name is something that someone wants to be a part of more so than, the no-name brand. So there's that. And then the other facet was the guys that are building to exit. Those guys are basically serial entrepreneurs. They've probably done this a couple times. This is a third or a fourth or a fifth company. Their long-term goal is to cash out. So they're looking at problems to solve, and then they build something that's sellable around it. And then they go and market it to people. And the people they're marketing it to are, again, it's a B2B conversation. So it's what does it do? How does it do it? Is it faster? Is it cheaper? What are the benefits? There is always a requirement of branding, in terms of the polish and the cohesion. You want things to look consistent. You want your fonts to be the same in the PowerPoint as it is in your product, where it makes sense. You don't have to go much further than that again, but business to consumer, it's all the marketing. It's how you speak to them. It's how how and where you engage as well. B2B, it's meetings. You're cold calling people. You're trying to sell this thing. You're trying to work through the negotiation, shares, the handover period, the intellectual property. Then there's also the part of, once you sell this company, you can't start another one and compete with us. There's that part, It's a lot more business minded.
Yep. That makes sense. So. We've actually done quite a lot of startups, like branding and product design and UX UI. Although they definitely have invested in branding with us and a full strategy. Not a full comprehensive, but enough that I think, again, I think in those cases it made the in-house team a little more. It was more for practical purposes other than anything because it's B2B. Yeah. So it really helped streamline their process. It really helped make sure that, that they were looking as professional as possible when they're out there. But I think the other element that we always, the other perspective that we always give any client, even if it's not product design, if it's a B2B company, is that whoever's buying your product or services, whatever company might be buying your product or services or wanting to use, they want to know that you understand their end consumer. For example, in one particular case, it's probably one of the most successful startups that we work with. It's called Big Wave, and it's their health insurance. They're kind of in the health insurance brokers space, wholesale health insurance, and they basically help streamline the process and be able to funnel leads that come through health insurance carriers to brokers. So if you're a broker, Kaiser can't take that lead in-house. They'll feed it and funnel it through using this app to another broker. And one of the things that we ended up doing for some of the branding, although the branding was a little bit light, definitely for that one, was we wanted to make sure that we knew that we understood the health insurance industry. So visually, right, it had to feel like it belonged in that space. And it had to be at that level so that, Kaiser and, any other health insurance carriers would see that and relate to that brand.
If you want to disrupt things, you need people to have a reaction. So there's that part of it. And then when you're talking about helping the startup up, one thing I'd encourage financially strapped companies is rather pay for a more senior individual than a team of juniors.
Absolutely. Oh, that makes perfect sense. So, I mean,
at least that's what I tell myself.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the team experience is much better than just having more hands on board.
You're not going to get a lot of, generally, and I apologize to those that do it, but at a low price point, you're not getting a lot of insight. You're just getting someone that can design. But that's great because you're going to get something that's presentable, but it didn't cost you very much.
Yeah. It's sort of a hybrid of what we're talking about. It's like we're using some tools, but we're still bringing in our strategy component, that foundation to help, establish some of those core things, the attributes of the brand, the positioning of the brand, and so forth.
That's what you're paying for. Like it's not the color and the logo and the font selection. All of that is available to anybody, but it comes down to that insight, that the heartbeat of your brand. That's what you pay for.
Yep.
Because if you get to a competitive space and people can compare you to somebody, you better be the better experience.
I mean, I see there's three things. I see it as a trio: the branding, the marketing, and the product development, which is product marketing. The branding, product, and marketing. Those three things have to be in sync and have to work together. And branding person needs to understand the product and the marketing. The marketing person needs to understand the product and the branding. And the product person needs to understand how it's being marketed, how it's being branded. All those three things need to work together, right? For the best chance for success for a startup. That gets me to our conclusion, which is like, ultimately at the end of the day, at least myself, my agency, and I know I'm speaking for you as well, we want to see the companies that we work with be successful, right?
Yeah.
I'm a designer, graphic designer by trade, creative director, but I'm also an artist in that sense, right? Like we want to make things, and sometimes that making becomes a partnership, and it's a partnership with these companies that we work with.
Yeah. We want to see you succeed. Yeah. Because the more customers that succeed means a bigger business for everybody. There's more people employed, there's more income, there's more new experiences. So why wouldn't you want to make sure that it does a great job out of the gate?
Well, thank you, JR. This has been pretty cool. I'm looking forward to doing more. We definitely have to do the brand and marketing one. So guys, if you guys are watching this, maybe look around here and see if we have the brand and marketing one. If not, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We're looking to do more content very similar to this. So we're just really starting out. Make sure to like the video down below, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you.